Hey everyone, welcome to Rational Conversations. Today we have a very special guest, at least one of the guys who got me into skepticism and who gave me the idea to start a podcast, and which has now evolved into this. Right after we do the intro, we'll introduce him and we'll get into talking about some little multicolored young people. No, that doesn't sound right.
I can talk about that if you want.
Hey everyone, welcome back. We are here together with Brian Dunning. Hey, welcome to the show.
Yay, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Considering you were one of my first and biggest influences in the skeptic movement, I would have hoped that I would have had you on much sooner than we did.
I think I've had you on a couple of my video broadcasts. We feel we had that covered.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so great to have you on. And because the thing is, the trouble that I've always had with inviting you on the show was like, we can talk about literally everything. You've covered ghosts and goblins, which you have in your hoodie, which I've had this t-shirt, by the way. Unfortunately I've grown out of it a little bit.
We'll have to get you a new one.
Time to order. Yes. 1x more. This is very healthy American diet I'm on, I think. I just had a McDonald's burger and
fries. Oh, good. Excellent.
Very Indian though, but I had the filet of fish and the McSpicy chicken, which I don't think is anywhere else in the world, because McDonald's has a very special place in its heart for us Indians.
I'm glad to know that. I was not aware.
We'll be happily clogged up soon. But the main reason I wanted to have you on the show is because you have recently, or you're about to release a movie called the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See.
They don't want you to see, yes.
Who is they? Yeah, that's the big
question.
Who
is they? That is, of course, I put that on the homepage for the movie's website under the frequently asked questions. There actually is a they. Obviously, it's a joke title, right? But if you think about it, there are people who make UFO programming on TV that depend on the audience being gullible and being willing to believe just about anything. Now, the more educated you are about astrophysics and astrobiology, the less likely you are to be interested in that programming. From a certain perspective, there actually are people who don't want people to have a better science-informed opinion about these matters. So the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See, yeah, it can refer to History Channel, Discovery Channel, Nat Geo, all of these networks that produce this pseudoscience programming.
And the government.
The government, of course. I think the government would probably rather people see this movie so they would stop hearing less grief and fewer accusations about hiding aliens underground and all of that.
But from what Mick West told me, who I had on recently, he said that basically the government actually encouraged the whole UFO thing when it came to the Roswell crash thing.
Yeah, that's a very interesting part of history, that flying saucers were in the news. And when people would discover actual government programs, like, for example, the Mogul balloon trains that was basically a spy device to look for Russian nuclear tests. When that crashed in the desert, they said, hey, let's come up with a cover story. And so they said, hey, it was a flying saucer. That's all it was. Don't worry about it. So in the early days, they would actually use these UFO stories as fake cover stories for actual things that people might have seen.
Because I thought it was the other way around, that people just came up with the whole UFO thing, that this must be a UFO that's crash landed. And then the government was like, that sounds good. Go ahead. Believe whatever you believe.
Yeah, they were happy to believe that. I actually did a show on that once about some of the efforts by the Air Force to use. It's a very complicated story because Soviet spies who did want to find out what kinds of things the American government was testing at places like Area 51. They actually would infiltrate some of the American UFO groups to find out, hey, have you guys gotten any photos of anything cool lately? Now, the UFO people thought these were flying saucers or whatever they were. The Soviets were hoping that these people might have gotten footage of actual American spy planes. And so the government actually did actively promote this disinformation, coming up with alien stories to hide actual classified programs. It's a fascinating part of history. It's a long time ago, though. That stuff's been out of date for a while.
Is this the reason why all the UFOs have a tendency of just going to the US straight off and saying, hey?
That's something that's a point that people make. They say, why is it that the UFOs, they always seem to go to the United States? That's actually not true. When you look at just about any other country's literature that's in their language, they all have pretty rich UFO mythologies of their own. They've all got their most famous UFO cases. It's that a lot of these don't get translated into English. And so a lot of people in the United States never end up hearing about them. And this recent case that David Grush talked about, the whistleblower in the congressional hearing, he mentioned this 1933 UFO case. That was an old story out of Italy. And very few American ufologists had heard of it because it had never been translated into English until recently.
Yeah. And there's a movie which is, I think, based in Chile or something, which a friend of mine sent me, talking about, or was it Mexico? That sounds a bit racist, but we're all brown. I can do this with brown people, can't I? But yeah, I can. We have a quick look and just see what the movie is. 1 second. It's very intriguing. It's just a movie trailer, really, and somehow it seems to be starring Jamie Foxx, called Moment of Contact. Sounds intriguing.
I don't know it. There's no reason I would know it. I'm not particularly interested in UFO promoting films.
Really? But you're promoting a UFO film.
I'm promoting a film about astronomy and astrophysics that uses the public interest in UFOs as a springboard. So I'm out here trying to teach science and rationalism, and I'm trying most to reach the people who are most interested in UFOs, who don't have a very good science-informed opinion on the subject. So that's part of the reason why I named the film the way I did, and that's part of the reason we talk about UFOs to some degree. But really, we're teaching astrophysics and astrobiology in a way that's going to improve anyone's knowledge, whatever your thoughts are on UFOs.
Very interesting. So tell me more about the project and what is it? Give us an overview of how the whole process started off, and then we'll get into the little nitty-gritties.
Yeah, as Skeptoid Media, we're an educational nonprofit. We produce the Skeptoid podcast, and one of the things that we also do is we're always working on a documentary film. And so when we finished our last film, which was 2022's Science Friction, it was, hey, what movie should we work on next? And I just asked a lot of people, and everyone said UFO, make a movie about UFOs, because that's been the subject everyone's been talking about and that so many people are interested in because of all of these silly congressional hearings and everything, and these Navy videos. And so that's why we decided to make a film about UFOs. It's not because I have any particular interest in UFOs, but UFOs provide as good an entry as anything other subject to teach good science. And teaching good science literacy is really what we're all about. And there's a lot of really fascinating science in the world of astrobiology and astrophysics when we're talking about alien life. What's the possibility of alien life ever actually coming to Earth? How will we eventually reach other aliens in the universe if we ever do? Are there other aliens in the universe? And how would we know that? So those are a lot of very interesting questions, and they've got really cool answers. So that's really what the movie is about.
Can you give us a couple of those answers?
Yeah, sure. We talk about one of the ways that we would detect an alien civilization, a hypothetical alien civilization, if one exists out there, would be by looking at exoplanets. Exoplanets are planets that are not in the solar system, that are way out there. Now, our current crop of space telescopes, including the James Webb Space Telescope, are not quite good enough to do this yet, but the next generation will be good enough to do this. And what they'll need to do is to resolve the atmosphere on those exoplanets, see what chemical compounds are in the atmosphere. And the two things that we're most interested in looking for are, number one, biosignatures, chemical compounds that are indicative of life on that planet. For example, if you looked at the Earth, you would see chlorophyll. Alien astrophysicists, if they're out there, they're looking at Earth right now going, oh my God, there's life all over that planet. So we hope to see biosignatures. It's even possible that we could see technosignatures. And technosignatures would be in indications that there's a technological civilization on that planet. Number one, basically smog, pollution. And number two would be things like concrete and metal and things that cover cities. Those actually have technosignatures that, again, if you were out in space looking at the Earth, you would see those technosignatures in our spectrum.
So would that
So
be,
there are actually very cool ways. Pardon me?
sorry for interrupting, but that
Oh.
would be true spectroscopy, is that
Yeah, exactly. We just need more powerful telescopes to look at the spectrum of the atmosphere and of the surface of that planet.
Awesome. All right. And because Kepler was basically trying to detect other planets through the wobble
Yeah.
stars
Yeah.
and transition,
Yes.
which is basically the dip in light that comes when a planet moves across the surface of a star.
Yeah.
We've detected thousands of exoplanets by now, right?
Over 5,000, yes.
5,000. And yet we don't know which ones would harbor life. I think James Webb has, not himself really, but the James Webb Space Telescope has had the first sighting of an actual planet orbiting a star, which is
the first actual optical image. Yeah,
absolutely fascinating.
it really is.
Blows my mind. But so for this, now, which are the telescopes which are going to be coming up? Do we have any names yet?
Yeah, I believe the names evolved because the projects are changing. The leading two candidates were one called LUVOIR and one called HABEX. And I believe they've combined those into one that I think is currently called LUVOIR 2. And LUVOIR stands for, oh gosh, it's light, ultraviolet, infrared, optical, whatever. And it will combine a type of telescope that's designed to look directly at a star with a dot in the middle that can block out the star itself. And then just an extremely powerful broad spectrum telescope that can look at all different kinds of aspects of it. And it's going to be much larger and much more specialized than James Webb. James Webb is better for doing general astronomy, looking at larger structures. And these will be specialized for looking at the tiniest structures, just a single exoplanet out there in space. Very exciting stuff.
Now, the thing is, most of us, we want to believe that come to Earth.
Absolutely.
Had generations of people who believe that we've already been visited. We've had science fiction movies, shows, and of course, many people, some of my friends too, are convinced that aliens are already here and these UFO sightings that we've got are realistic. Now, from your perspective, why are they not realistic?
Yeah, you bring up a number of important points. And I think the first point you bring up is that we all share common ground in that we all want to meet alien neighbors. I think that's pretty much universal, except for some people who think they're going to destroy the Earth. But most of us just we want to meet them. We want to see them. We want to know more about them, assuming they're out there.
Yeah.
And then you point out that the latest survey in the United States is that some 40% of people, Americans, believe that aliens have visited the Earth. That's an astonishingly high percentage.
Yeah.
When we start looking at, okay, how are we going to meet our alien neighbors? How are we going to find them? How are we going to be able to communicate with them? Here you've got 40% of people saying, we already have, they're already here, they're already visiting. Now, it's very important that we have a really high standard of evidence for the quality of data that we accept. I do talk about 3 or 4 famous UFO cases that a lot of people believe are real, that have basically just been heavily fictionalized by television shows. And we talk about why those are very bad evidence and why we need a higher standard of evidence. That's how we're actually going to prove for a fact that we've encountered aliens, by having really strong evidence. And I think that's also another place for common ground. We all agree that we want the evidence to be good. We don't want the evidence to be bad. So we do get, I hesitate to call it debunking. We do debunk 3 or 4 cases in the film, but it's for the purpose, the much more important purpose of understanding why those are terrible evidence and how we'd find better evidence.
And of course, you've done a huge number of debunkings on your show, on the Skeptoid podcast, which have usually turned out to be very indistinct, unclear imagery, or complete outright scams, which are...
You find all types, everything from deliberate hoaxes, which is a small part, to just bad evidence that people interpret as aliens because they want it to be aliens so much, and they're so invested in the idea that these are aliens that are visiting, that they want to interpret almost anything as aliens.
There was one very important thing which a friend of mine contacted me, like we were chatting after my interview with Mick West, and he watched the video and he says that, and he is a skeptic. He is a hardcore skeptic, militant even when it comes to atheism in that manner. But he said and you've done a lot of these write-in shows where you've asked your listeners to write in about experiences that they've had and they can't explain, which I think is it's a fantastic idea, by the way. It helps people come to terms with what they've seen and things that they've been wondering about for their whole lives. So in that fashion, I would like to ask you that there's this gentleman, he swears that around the age of 8, when he was a child, he saw what we've now commonly seen as this triangular shaped UFO. It's 3 lights, or an array of lights, and array of lights that are shaped in a triangle. What do we know about these kinds of UFOs? What could they be? What could he have seen? And he is absolutely convinced that it could not be any natural phenomenon or anything of that sort. But what could it be? What do you think?
So, I mean, this is a difficult case. First of all, because he was 8 years old, this is an extremely old memory. And the one thing we know for an absolute fact is that memories change dramatically over time. So what he tells us is a very unreliable account. And it's a personal anecdote, so it's unreliable from a number of ways. Now, I don't say that he's making it up. I'm sure that his memory is a genuine one that he believes is true. As for why what he remembers is a triangle UFO was put into the public consciousness I think it was in the 1990s. There was a huge wave of UFO sightings in Belgium that made worldwide news. And there was only one photograph that came out of this. And it was of a very clear photograph of a big black triangle with a bright light at each of the 3 corners. And so ever since then, triangular UFOs have been featured in movies. They've been featured in TV shows, The X-Files, all kinds of TV shows. The black triangle UFO is a very popular character. And it all goes back to this Belgium case. The guys who made that black triangle out of styrofoam and put 3 flashlights in the corners and took the photographs of it in order to hoax the news, they came out years and years later and they said, here's the model, here's the lights we put in the corners, here's how we hung it up in the warehouse in our office, and here's how we took the photograph. Now, the fact that it was a hoax doesn't really matter. What matters is it was placed into the public consciousness. So if anyone does remember seeing a TV show or anything like that as early as the 1990s, I believe was when this happened, then it's very probable that they've got a memory in their head of seeing a black triangle UFO. I am going to say that for this particular gentleman's report, I'm going to say we don't have enough information to make any kind of conclusion at all, but we do know it's very reasonable that this is just a false memory he has because black triangles have been in the consciousness for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And And there are all sorts of things that we have a tendency of seeing, especially when we're children, and these memories get warped and changed. But the weird thing is, we are absolutely convinced that these are accurate memories.
Hmm.
They are almost, they almost never are. I can still remember certain incidences that I can swear were absolutely accurate. And I feel like I've held on to them for the last 20 or 30 years very accurately. But I know, and it's really weird and strange and annoying in a way. And of course, very, I mean, we're all very perplexed and resistant to the idea that could, any of our memories could possibly be wrong. But they often are, more often than not, and about more things than you can imagine. I have had these conversations with so many friends where I'm convinced that this such and such thing happened. They are convinced that it didn't happen that way, or that it was somebody else.
Yeah.
I was just imagining myself in another person's shoes, and it feels like I lived through that experience. It's so freaky. But another thing that I've understood from listening to a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson's podcasts and videos is that we actually have, in the galaxy, we have such massive amounts of space between stars that even traveling at light speed, they would take hundreds of years to reach. And maybe life is not common enough that we have anything within, say, 50 light years of Earth, or even 100 light years from Earth. But even then, first of all, as it's physically impossible to travel at the speed of light, only something which is completely massless, like a photon or an electron, can travel at that speed. And of course, we don't know whether there's an alien species that can now bend the laws of physics and start being able to fly through space, like Star Trek warp drives and stuff like that, which I think they thought that up after the fact of actually creating it. But I don't know.
We talk about that in the movie. We talk to astrophysicists about it's a very common belief for people to say aliens are smarter than us, therefore the laws of physics don't apply to them and they can do anything. They're magic.
Yeah.
There are very good mathematical arguments against that, and we talk to astrophysicists about that in the movie.
Mm. That's the tricky part, because even if they have to abide by the laws of physics, and even if they do, it's going to take hundreds of years or thousands of years for them to reach us. Why they'd want to reach us in the first place is also, we have to be realistic. We're not that amazing. I mean, but we also have this. We are, of course, quite egotistical as a race. So, oh, why wouldn't they want to know us? They would want to know us. Don't we all feel that way at times when we're at parties, or at least before we go to parties?
I know that we would want to, in any alien race at all, we would want to learn everything about them. We would be fascinated. And I suspect that it's more likely that way for the aliens, hypothetical aliens as well. If there's a civilization out there that they were actually able to get in touch with in some way, I think they'd make every effort to do it.
Well, yeah, optimistically, absolutely. I think they would, as are we. And we, of course, we are already trying to find these signs of life. Every spare piece of currency across the planet that we can. We are different countries focusing their radio telescopes, their other telescopes, the regular telescopes, even amateur astronomers, which have got their little radars out there looking for signs. I think SETI had that project for a while, which was combing through the data that their radio telescopes were picking up for looking for signs of life. But I also think that the only plausible thing that I would really say that might have some validity to it is that they've sent probes, which are inanimate probes that can be traveling through space for hundreds of thousands of years without the need for sleeping or resting or procreating or anything of that sort. Maybe they would be procreating on the way, multiplying in numbers. But I don't, for example, we are having so much trouble even sending humans to the moon or humans to Mars. And we have to account for not only the human lifespan, but the effects of zero gravity on your body, the effects of social interactions in closed spaces for long periods of time with the same people. Things can get hairy. And for intelligent beings, whether or not they have anything close to a human lifespan or maybe multiples of human lifespans, they would also have to think very carefully about cosmic waves, about the effects of zero gravity on their bodies, about maybe even relativity if they're traveling at those speeds, micrometeorites for thousands of years. God knows what you're going to be. Oh, wrong choice of words. Who knows what you're going to be hit by when you've been traveling for thousands of years in space? You could be just ready to crash. Aha. By the time you reach your destination, which is another thing that people have contested, saying that if UFOs, if these are aliens and they've been traveling for hundreds of light years across the universe or the galaxy or whatever, why would they just come to Earth and go crash? That just doesn't make sense. But these guys in the Congress, they had, I watched this entire thing. I did speed it up a little bit, but I watched the entire thing. Did you watch the entire Congress hearing for this?
Not all of it, but most of it. I scrolled to all the witnesses whose comments I were interested in hearing.
Ah, yes. This Grush fella, he reminds me of some people I know who seems very confident about what he's saying, and then he says absolutely nothing. Everything is, I can say it behind closed doors. I can say it behind closed doors. But 90%, not even that, I think pretty much all of the information he has is from secondhand sources, right?
Oh, yeah. In most cases, it's probably third and fourth hand sources of stories that were never good stories to begin with. He only mentioned two stories that we could identify confidently which ones he was talking about. One of them was Roswell. And I'm sorry, but that gave him a really bad start. That's been so thoroughly debunked for decades. And then the other one was this 1933 crash from Italy, which was a hoax to begin with. And all of the details, which he mentioned on his News Nation interview, all those details were added by a man who had nothing to do with it, who was quite probably schizophrenic, and whose whole career was writing to UFO authors and saying, here's a whole bunch of extra information about this story. So David Grush appears to be just staggeringly gullible. He has a long history with a lot of these UFO personalities. So we know that he's been a UFO believer for a long time. And he just seems to basically believe everything that confirms his preferred worldview, which is that aliens actively visit the Earth. That's, unfortunately who we're dealing with.
Well, it doesn't seem.
But because he was a military veteran, people say, oh, he can't be wrong.
Yeah.
Military veterans are unimpeachable witnesses. Whatever they say is true.
Yeah, and including the Navy pilot. What was his name?
You had Fravor and Graves were the other two guys. Yeah.
So Fravor's sightings, especially what is it? The infrared cam, FLIR cam, and Go Fast, and these ones that I talked to Mick West about these, where they're very clearly infrared flares. Those aren't really UFOs. They seem to be exhausts of other planes, which doesn't seem to carry any weight whatsoever when it comes to any of these. And of course, his experiences were all back in the 90s, right?
Yeah, these are very old stories. And and he's another one, Fravor. If you look at all the other interviews that he's given, many interviews on various podcasts and YouTube channels, he's clearly someone who believes in alien visitation. Again, you've got a case of a person who's presented with one little thing. I think his wingman, Alex Dietrich, I think she said the entire event was something like 5 seconds long. He sees something for 5 seconds that he doesn't know what he's looking at in 5 seconds on his screen, and therefore it's aliens. He's just one of these people who has this mindset. He tends to see aliens in everything that he hears about.
Exactly. And just earlier this evening, actually, I watched this video which has been making its rounds. This was just 2 months ago. And of course, it's on History Channel. Therefore, this is a video of this little silver ball, which apparently flies super fast across between two jets. And
okay.
all over the news. And I looked at that. I was like, that just looks like one of those helium balloons. And some of them have metallic, shiny outer coatings to maybe help them regulate their temperature or something of that sort.
Yeah, you're talking about the Mylar party balloons.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that could be a thing. And That just flew past, and it is a smudge with a smaller smudge on it. There's really nothing on it, and all the experts that they have in the shows, of course, they'll say, "Oh yeah, 100% UFO, couldn't be anything else." When it could very obviously, there's one of the military personnel that they have spoken to who says that most probably something like this would be a balloon. But then that is immediately poo-pooed away. Can't be a balloon. We're History Channel. We can't take any of that nonsense.
When I was a kid, we used to do a lot of sailing off of the Southern California coast, and there was a cruise ship line that would go right through there. One of the shipping channels was cruise ships all the time. And every time a cruise ship went by, they would leave this incredible debris trail of oil slicks and garbage in the water and Mylar party balloons everywhere. And we had radar on our sailboat, and the Mylar party balloons, I can tell you, they absolutely show up on radar. Mylar is what a radar reflector is made of. When you're a sailboat, you hoist a radar reflector up to the top of your mast so that other ships can see you. And yes, Mylar party balloons are very common over the oceans, and they do show up on radar. And if you fly past them really fast, they look like some big silvery, shiny orb. In fact, as you probably know, someone was able to freeze frame one of these videos taken by an F-18 fighter that whooshed past a silver thing going past it. And on the freeze frame, you could actually tell that it was a familiar Batman balloon that was sold on Amazon.
That's fantastic.
And it was presented as evidence of alien visitation. This is what we're talking about when we have a low standard for the quality of evidence that we accept. If you fail to eliminate a Batman party balloon from the possibilities, you're not doing good science. You're failing to falsify your evidence.
This is the same as ghost hunters seeing orbs / dust particles which have come in front of your infrared camera light, and or rods which are basically bugs flying straight past the lens or something of that. Like even we had gone to Ladakh, which is in the Himalayas, into the very northern parts of India, very high altitudes, because we'd gone there for astrophotography. Just as this was in July, and it's a stunning place. If you ever come to this side of the world, that is one of the places you got to go. It's absolutely stunning, and we have probably the highest observatory in Asia there, which is at 14,000 feet. And we went to that observatory. It was very nice. We had a look around. Unfortunately, every night it was always cloudy, and the clearest thing that we could see was Elon Musk's Starlink satellites marching one after another. So, everybody was very excited because this is the first time we've seen it, but that's not going to last very long. But the funny thing was, a couple of nights in a row, several people in our group, they were taking pictures, pointing straight up, long exposures, and would see this weird line across their image. And they're like, what could that be? I looked at it and I was like, it's a bug.
Yeah.
What? We didn't see any bugs. I was like, yeah, that's because we've got a long exposure, wide open aperture camera that is pointing straight up. And this is just a bug doing its rounds, doing bug things, wandering across your lens, reflecting some of the light that you're picking up from other sources that we have around you. That's it. It's like, no, that can't be a bug. What else could it be? Oh, no.
Bugs and birds are two other superstars of UFO reports. There's another point that we make in the film. We have an air traffic controller and a pilot who both make this point that you cannot judge the size or distance of a point that you see in the sky. If you see a dot, this is not something that can be trained. This is just geometry. It prevents any observer from being able to tell how far away it is. Something that's close and slow looks exactly the same as something that's far and fast. So if you see a bug flying around like this, that looks exactly the same as if it was a UFO flying 10,000 miles an hour, 5 miles away.
Wow.
And this is another thing that people insist that it was far away. I'm sorry, you can't know that. And that's geometry. That's not human. That's not training. That's geometry.
And it's of course it's perception, because you have nothing, you have no points of reference, especially when you're flying. You have clouds, which there is no way to determine, especially at those altitudes, how far away anything is. And one thing that you can that is demonstrated in Ladakh is that because the atmosphere is so thin up there, 14,000 feet, 16,000 feet, even 18,000 feet up in altitude, that you're just wandering around in, there are mountain ranges that you can see way off into the distance, and you have absolutely no concept of how far away they are, even though you're on land, because the atmospheric haze just isn't as much as you're used to in the plains. It's just this air is so thin, you can see for tens of miles for really far off, and you
Yeah.
do not understand the concept of how big things are until you see a tiny dot moving across the surface of a mountain, and is, oh shit, is that a car? It's like so
The astronauts who were on the moon talked about this. They would see hills that they knew to be tens of miles away, and it looked like it was 50 yards away because there's no clearer atmosphere than on the moon. You
yeah,
just you could not judge distances at all.
absolutely. And to think that one thing, though, the bird thing reminded me, there are actually people out there who think birds don't exist. Have you seen this?
That's a joke. There may be some people who bought into it, who saw other people talking about it and decided, I guess that must be a thing. But it was started as a joke. It was started as by a guy who was making fun of conspiracy theorists.
Really? Oh, I had no.
Yes.
I thought people actually.
Actually, the Wikipedia page on that it tells a pretty good version of the story.
Oh, nice. I think Susan Gerbic has been responsible for putting that one. Or at least somebody from her team, from the Gorilla Skeptics, is probably.
She could well be, yes.
And so, what else? What are the projects that you have going on? What's up next for Skeptoid?
We're not sure what movie we're going to do next. Now that this one is finished, we got to work on some other things. We're growing as a company, and we've got a lot of housekeeping stuff we've got to take care of. We're still working on the weekly Skeptoid podcast. I just recorded an episode this morning. We're developing other programming. We're trying to come up with some new podcasts that we're going to produce as well. And so the next movie, I hope to get it started probably next year in 2024. And not quite sure what it's going to be about yet. But we're always very busy here. We've got, I think, 4 full-time people and a couple of volunteers. And we've been growing our board of directors and working on some grant proposals and things. Lots of fun stuff going on. It's busy. It doesn't leave me as much time as I wish I had for doing projects.
One thing I got to tell you, your YouTube channel, The Feeding Tube, and In Fact, these really, you need to increase the frequency of those, because those are.
I know. That's something that we're working on, is we need to rebuild the business models for those and really relaunch both of those series. And it's something we absolutely plan to do, but we're just spread too thin right now.
But okay, I want to get back into that for a second. But first and foremost, I've been trying to find science fiction so I can watch it on TV, and it's not on any of the Indian streaming services. Where else can we find it? So it should be on the website, right?
Yeah, if you go to sciencefriction.tv, all the streaming the streaming options, I believe, should all be listed there. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you which ones might be available in India. There should be one for Vimeo, though, and Vimeo is available worldwide.
Yeah, Vimeo.
Let's see. Sciencefriction.tv. Yeah, there's a Vimeo on demand. You can see it on Vimeo on demand.
Wonderful. And the same for the UFO movie, which is at
the UFO movie it's only available on Vimeo right now, but it's pending to appear on Amazon Prime. But I think that's only going to be US and UK, and then it's also pending to appear on Tubi TV. And I'm not sure what countries that should offer, but Vimeo will always be an option for everyone. And again, the UFO movie, it is available to watch right now, and that website is the UFO.movie.
Yes.
People don't realize .movie is just like .com. Yes, you can actually go to the UFO.movie and all the streaming services, which is just the one right now. You can link right to it on the movie's homepage, and you can watch the trailers and all that stuff.
Awesome. So I'll put the links in the description. So everybody, please go watch that. Now, before we wrap up, I know you're tight on time. I just want
Yes.
to quickly ask you, what was the birth of the Skeptoid podcast? What happened to get you getting into that? How did that start?
I my college background was writing for film and TV. I took writing for film and television at UCLA. I was always interested in science, but I couldn't really do both in college, so that's the direction that I chose to go. But I never really worked in the field.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until much later that podcasts came out, and I learned what a podcast was, and I started listening to a couple, and I said, "Oh my gosh, there is finally the perfect opportunity for me to combine my interests, the entertainment aspect of making some programming and the science aspect of making some programming about science." That's how it got started. It was just an opportunity that fell in my lap because podcasts became a thing. And so I took 5 subjects that I were pet peeves of mine, I think, of pseudosciences that people believed. At the time, you had to have, this is 2006, you had to have 5 episodes of your podcast in order to get it listed on iTunes. So I
Mhm.
made 5 episodes, got it listed on iTunes, and it took off from there. I honestly didn't think I was going to continue doing it. I thought it was going to be just a one-time little hobby. But people responded, people loved it, people started sending me ideas, and it grew, and it became my full-time job in 2010. 2012, it became a nonprofit, and here we are today,
That's
still
amazing.
doing the same thing. And it's been, yeah, it's just been I'm very lucky to be able to get to do this for a living. I love it more than anything.
And it's so amazing. It's just those bite-sized, which is something I really want to get back to. I started off with a bite-sized podcast inspired by Skeptoid, but I really want to get back into those bite-sized 10, 15-minute long video slash podcasts that,
Yeah.
get across that really in-depth, deep dive information about what is the most important things to know about each topic. And the good thing is you have topics that are basically not going to get old. This is not about trending or anything of that sort, right?
Yeah, I don't do any current events. The idea is for all the episodes to be timeless. You can sit and binge 15 years of Skeptoid right now, and all the episodes are as relevant as they ever were.
Yeah, which is in a way a little discouraging because if you know what I mean. But at the same time very informative, and I binge, I don't know, 10, 15 episodes at a go every now and then whenever I'm going for a nice long drive. So it's
Yep.
always great to hear, and I'm glad you're out there doing what you're doing, and thanks for inspiring me and inspiring everybody else who's been listening to you and influenced by you. So
I am very honored that you would say that. Thank you very much.
and it was a pleasure meeting you for the first time when in 2018 in Psychon. I was like coming up to a rock star fan, be like, "Oh, it's Brian Dunning," and now
And then you were disappointed.
I get very jealous of Richard Saunders, who keeps coming down and posting about how much beer and whiskey he's guzzling with you. But
Yes.
next time I manage to come in, I won't be able to come this year, but next time we're going to hang out and we're going to get blitzed
I
as
look forward to that very much.
much as my liver can handle.
Got your got your guest room ready.
All right. Cool. Thank you. All right. Take care, Brian. Thank you so much for joining us. Next time, we're going to be talking about ghosts and cryptids. I swear, I've been wanting to talk about this for a long time. So, you and Kenny Biddle are on the next run up.
Excellent.
Great. And thank you, everybody, for joining us on Rationable Conversations with Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid podcast and skeptoid.com. Please go check it out. Go listen to his podcast. Watch the videos. They're on YouTube. I'll put all the links down below. So, in fact, and the feeding tube, which are very informative. And if you like this conversation, if you like the video, please give it a like. If you didn't like it, give it a dislike and tell me why you didn't. And until next time, be rational and subscribe. See ya.